Hello everyone and welcome to the Training Summit meeting. My name is Jan and I'll be moderating today's call. Our speaker today is Ethan Sanders, Director of Learning at AARP. He'll be presenting From Strategy to Performance, Achieving Business Results Through Innovative Learning. We'll turn to the presentation in just a moment, but first I want to go over the web conference instructions. Everyone is currently in mute so that the background noise does not become distracting for others. To view today's presentation as the screens change live, go to the link you received in your reminder email. Once there, you can click anywhere on a page and ask a question by posting it as a comment. We'll make sure all of your questions are answered. For the newer participants in the group, it might be useful to review some of the main benefits you can take advantage of as a member at no additional charge. First are the live monthly web conference meetings, which you've already dialed into today. I hope you find these useful, and we have an excellent lineup, which you can see by going to our website schedule page. Second, we do record all of these, so if you're traveling or stuck in another meeting, simply log in and the full archives of past meetings are available to you with a number of interesting topics. Third, get to know the other members. By logging in, you can see all of their profiles, and we're glad to make introductions if wished. Fourth, if you're wrestling with any key issues or decisions, we strongly encourage you to reach out to the other members, and our site makes it very easy to post questions. The seniority and experience of your fellow members makes this the best possible forum to get advice from others who've probably dealt with the same issues and can give you sound advice on what worked and what did not. Fifth, we really encourage site visits. If you've not visited others' offices to have a great discussion on best practices and see their facilities, please do so. You can log in to see the other members' companies and cities, so feel free to reach out, or as mentioned, we're happy to make introductions. Six, we also generate executive summaries of meetings, including the key takeaways and learning nuggets, so that you can reference them and put them right into action. Seventh, our members are very busy, so we started a service where we pick out the top 6 most interesting articles among thousands at hundreds of sites to keep you abreast and ensure you don't miss the key ones. Lastly is our Book of the Month summary that you can either read or listen to as you commute. Each month we'll be selecting the most interesting book, then summarizing the ideas, so within minutes you can absorb the key takeaways. There are many other benefits, of course, but I wanted to highlight a few and ask you to keep a lookout in your inbox for a number of these each month. That takes care of the housekeeping items. If you'll just give me a moment to pull up the speaker's presentation and introduce him. Okay, all set. Now before I turn the call over, I'd like to tell you a bit about today's speaker. Ethan Sanders is the Director of Learning for AARP, where his team focuses on all aspects of workforce leadership development and professional development. Ethan has provided consulting services to clients in the public, nonprofit, military, and private sectors for more than 30 years. He's also run his own instructional design firm, directed a division within a military command dedicated to the human performance improvement, and managed instructional design and competency research for a nonprofit organization for workplace learning and performance professionals. He's a nationally recognized speaker and has published numerous books and articles related to workplace learning and performance. Ethan has received numerous professional awards and has been an ASTD faculty member for more than 20 years and an associate professor at the University of Maryland for 10. You may read his complete bio in the email sent to you. Ethan, thank you so much for being with us today. Just say next when you wish the slides to advance, and the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd really like to start by just thanking you all for attending today's session. Having been in learning development for such a long time, one thing I'm assured of is that we all have way too much to do and way too little time to do it in. So the fact that you would take an hour out of your day to come and listen to this presentation, and hopefully we'll get to chat and talk a little bit, I really just do appreciate it. So, as I should say this is my third time presenting, and I'm a big evaluation guy for learning, and I guess the fact that I got invited back indicates I can't be too bad at this, right? So hopefully that you'll agree. If I get to the next slide, as having been both on the academic side, the research side, the practitioner side of this business, I know that there's a fair amount of literature out there on how do you develop a good learning and development strategy, a little bit less literature on how do you implement it. And what seems to be really lacking are just compelling examples, stories about how people have done this and the reality of what it takes to win executive support and to rally a learning and development team and to figure out what kind of content we're going to deliver and how, and to how to actually develop the strategy. And there's just not a lot of great examples out there. And so when I was asked to present, I said, maybe that's what I could provide is kind of a frontline view of what it takes to go from a theory to a strategy to an implementation to measurement of results. So that's what I'm going to try to do in about a 40-minute span, right? So how do you move from needs analysis to strategy to implementation? And then I thought I'd highlight just one of our programs called Connect, because I think it really demonstrates how we learned as we walked through this whole process and how integrated into the content and the curriculum are all the strategies and concepts that we came up with for learning and development at AARP. And I am very proud to be at AARP. I think it's an amazing organization. It does amazing work for American society. So if we go to the next slide. So probably many of you have heard of AARP. It is one of the largest nonprofit social mission organizations in the world. We are both nonpartisan and nonprofit, although we do have sections of the organization that are for-profit. This AARP Services, Inc. is where you see a lot of the commercials for services for the 50-plus population, including insurance and travel and things of that nature. We have about 38 million members and growing at about 2,400 employees. But, if you look at the demographics of our employee population, it's really quite astounding. The average age of an employee at AARP is 49 and a half, which seems mystical given that our membership starts at 50, and highly educated. And, there aren't a lot of entry-level positions at AARP. The vast majority of people come in are already experts at something to do with aging, whether it's isolation, hunger, homelessness, finances, mental health, anything around people 50 and over. And, of course, we also have tens of thousands of volunteers, depending on the time of the year. We have state offices in all 50 states, plus U.S. territories. And we have the largest circulation of a magazine. Believe it or not, it is the world's largest magazine, the AARP magazine, with over 40 million regular readers, plus we have a bulletin. So very large, diverse, complex organization. I will say, in my previous jobs, I've come from organizations with many, many more people, 12,000 people, the last consulting company I came from, nowhere near as complex as AARP, with only 2,400 employees and tens of thousands of volunteers. Next slide, please. So I decided, let's make today a story, hopefully one that you follow and will ask questions about, and hopefully it'll sink in a little bit to think about, well, how can I apply some of this to how I'm running my L&D shop, or some things I might want to try. So one of the reasons I was at ICF International, I was a senior fellow, loved the organization, loved what I did, amazing team. But I made several comments to clients of mine over the years, including some nonprofits, that I think if I ever left my organization, it'd be to get back into the nonprofit world, because I worked for ATD in the 90s, really did enjoy it, did a lot of work for SHRM over the years, and when I had my own company, the vast majority of our clients were nonprofits. So I always kind of missed that social mission kind of organization thing. And this opportunity at AARP came up to become the director of learning. And as I always say, when I got there, which was September of 2015, late September 2015, we had no employees within learning and development. We had no strategy. We actually had no courses. There had been courses in the past, but they kind of fizzled out. We didn't really have an infrastructure whatsoever, and limited manager support. Not a lot of people even knew what L&D did, nor really cared. So, other than that, we had everything we needed. So kind of like the adage, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? So we really had a lot of work to do, starting with hiring an L&D team. And so that's where we were in 2015. Now, if you fast forward, next slide, please, to 2019, the end of 2019, I think our proudest achievement was winning ATD's Best Award. And if you're not familiar with that, about 160 organizations globally compete for this. It's a massive application you fill out, about 20 pages, where you have to provide real evidence, testimonials and attestations about the work that learning and development is doing within your organization. So about 160 organizations applied for it globally, somewhere in the mid-50s, I think 52, 53 people qualified for the criteria to say that they met the criteria for a best award. And then of that, we won 16th overall globally, which, most of the organizations who compete for this have done it year after year. We were brand new to it. So how did we get there is kind of today's story. And if you look at today, going from no classes, no employees, no strategy, to open workshops, big course catalog with high participation rates, high satisfaction rates, high levels of application back on the job, to business unit development. We work across the enterprise within every business unit, offering team-based training. We have a very immersive executive education program. We have Connect, which I'll explain to you, as an internal cohort-based program. And then, of course, we have a large online learning presence as well, which I won't spend much time talking about it. And I could say with complete confidence that we have the best executive leadership support we could ask for, right? Not just rah-rah speeches and testimonials, but actually vast majority of our cohort-based programs, the executive CEO, COO, heads of our different business units teach within the program, executive storytelling within the program, panelists and judges for projects within the program. It's truly immersive and complete senior leadership support. And really, to me, we've arrived because we don't have to tout our programs. Our executives do it for us. So next slide. So this is way too small for you all to see. I'm sorry, when it got converted, I guess you can't really see it. Let me read it to you just slightly off of a different slide. So when you look at AARP's strategy, as you can imagine, being a very large organization that's representing 38 million people, what we're really trying to do is what's called the 3 Gs. We're trying to fight for and equip every individual over 50 to live their best life. AARP doesn't tell people how to live their lives, but we make it that people can live their lives in dignity and do what they want to do. Okay? And to do that, we kind of have these 3 Gs, which are the red bubbles that are hard to see. Grow impact, which we can measure. How many lives do we actually touch, which is in the millions? Grow relevance. How do we know in every demographic slice you could think of that we have relevance to those individuals, right? And of course, we're a nonprofit, but we need to grow revenue so that we can reinvest that money into the organization in order to fund our foundation, which is a very large charity. So we have these 3 buckets: health security, which is the gray row on your left, financial resilience, and personal fulfillment. So if you actually looked at all AARP's programs and services, they either help people live a healthy life or a financially secure life, or that they find personal fulfillment, and in particular, reducing isolation in older populations, and digital literacy and inclusion and all those. So this is the AARP strategy, and I'll ask for them to send the slides out with a better graphic so you can see it a little bit better. You can see it on our website as well. Next slide, please. So if you go from that 50,000-foot view with the AARP strategy, now you got to build a bridge between that and programs and learning and employee development. So we essentially go from the 3 Gs on the left, grow impact, relevance, and revenue, and we came up with a strategy for what does the workforce actually have to look like in terms of skills, knowledge, abilities, resources, support. What does that actually look like? And ultimately, that gets you to organizational capabilities, the right people in the right job, with the right skills, at the right time, with the right support, with the right managers. And there's a whole series of organizational capabilities that get you from the strategy on the left, and ultimately so what is it people need to know, skills, time, environment, all these kinds of things, in order to get you there. And then our programs, as you'll quickly see, are built around the identification of those competencies. Okay, now we do use the Korn Ferry competencies. I don't advocate any particular set, but what's important is that the executives really had a chance to align these competencies to what they see as the future of the organization. What does the workforce need to look like in order to realize the strategies that we've set forward? So that's kind of the bridge that we build between organizational strategy, ultimately to competencies, and then to programs that align to those competencies. Next slide. Okay. So again, rewinding once more to 2015, as we looked around, we said, we're not going to start it's tempting, by the way, to just start rolling out programs. Oh, I know this great leadership program we did at the last place, and we could pair it with this kind of training over here. I've got a course that I wrote years ago. It's very tempting, to start rolling stuff out, but we were extremely fortunate that we had the support of our leaders to say, you know what, if it takes you a year to get courses out, then it takes you a year, right? You need to really step back and build a strategy. So we have multi-prongs to this. If you look at the little blue bubble off of the left that says best practice research, we had a whole legion of graduate students researching for us best practices in leadership development, in employee development, in measurement, right, in structures of learning and development departments, with huge amounts of research done to try to figure out what's the leading thinking. And even though I've done this for 30 years, right, or at that point 25 years, I didn't want to rely strictly on my experience or the experience of my team. I really wanted to see what current thinking was around this, even distributed forms of learning, e-learning, etc. Then, if you look at the top of the funnel, we did amazing amounts of document review. We looked at the AARP strategy, which is many pages, 50, 60 pages. We actually went on to Glassdoor.com and went through and coded every single response on there that had to do with leadership, management, development, career progression. So we could really see what not only current employees were saying, but also what previous employees said. And of course, we also looked at employee engagement surveys that have been done for the last 5 years. AARP had its own set of leadership behaviors, and we looked at that. And then we went around and reviewed, you see the bubble in the back, the E team, that's our executive team. We interviewed all the executive team and the L team, which is about 80 of our top VPs and SVPs within the organization. So we did all this research. This was our very divergent thinking. And then we ran a series of workshops, both with our team, HR consulting, and external stakeholders to formulate the actual strategy itself. All right, so we ran probably 7 or 8 workshops, and essentially we would feed back to the participants what we learned through the research, get them to reflect on it, and do a series of exercises, affinity diagrams, nominal group techniques, to try to figure out, so what does this mean in terms of what our strategy is for learning and development. So next slide. So, having done all this research and all these discussions, it's very tempting to start formulating this actual strategies and writing the document. But we said, you know what, let's step back and look at a really good idea related to strategy, which is, so if this is the way the world looks based on the research that we've done, what is our theory of victory? How do we think we're really going to win at this game of learning and development? And so we did a really right-brain creative exercise called Theory of Victory. We said, well, based on this, first of all, people have been waiting a long time, and the executives have been waiting for a long time to have this kind of capability, a learning and development capability. So we said, we can't theorize and postulate on this forever. We've got to get some things out there very, very quickly that shows we can deliver. And of course, fortunately, we found out that managers and executives have been asked for a long time for a basic introduction to supervision. They felt that the organization was at a high-level risk, because we really didn't have something like that. And we said, you know what? We could put that together. I mean, this was now about Thanksgiving time in 2015. We said, you know what? We've written enough of these. We could pull together out of HR kind of what are the main issues, the main topics like performance management and learning and development and compensation. We could pull these things together, put all the managers who've been hired or promoted in the last couple of years together, and we rolled it out in January, just about 2 months later. And within about a year, we had everybody who needed to go through it. Now, I can't say it changed our social mission and solved world hunger, but it absolutely demonstrated that we were serious about rolling up our sleeves and getting things done. All right. Now, at the same time, we had to think longer term, higher impact. Right. So we had to demonstrate that we could do this for all levels. There were perceptions that only top tier people in the organization got training, so we knew we had to give it at all levels. We had to be really clear about what I like to call reach versus grasp versus influence, right? The truth is most organizations, learning and development doesn't fall just within learning and development, right? there's a lot of shadow training that goes on. Each business unit, certain managers like to run their own training, or they go to outside training vendors. And we decided early on, we're not going to fight with that. You know what? People want to go out and get their own training, go right ahead. But what I can tell you is what we offer is going to be really top-notch. We are going to let word of mouth and spread the gospel, right? And we're going to eventually show that we can do this really well. And by the way, we can incur all the costs and save the money, the organization lots of money. And people will eventually decide we'd rather have learning and development do it. And that's exactly what's happened. So we went about building our coalition of support really within HR, and a lot of HR was new at this point, and within the whole enterprise. And then, of course, linking learning to goals and priorities and help HR, succeed writ large. Next slide. So those are kind of our theories of victories. Now, we did actually put together a strategic plan. I won't bore you with the whole thing, but I love this little Parthenon graphic. I'll show you in a moment our mission and our vision statements. I think they're really key. But when we looked at everything that we really need to do, if you look at that theory of victory closely, here's what it says. It says, one, we have to have relevance. We have to ensure that everything we do is not just perceived by us as having value, but by our end users, by our managers, by our executives. It's really clear. We're much better to have less training and have it perfectly targeted at organizational outcomes that people are looking to get to. Okay, so that's the relevance pillar. Then there's the relationship pillar, right? We have to improve perceptions. There were some very negative perceptions of internal training, some of which had nothing to do with the old learning and development function, just had to do with internal functions in other parts of the business that had tried their own training and basically created, I'm using air quotes, academies, which were big compilations of PowerPoint that bored people. So we needed to overcome that. And then, the funny thing about being in AARP is, management's very important, because even though I have a very generous training budget, every dollar I spend on training is a dollar that could have gone towards homelessness or isolation in the elderly. So we've got to really show that we can run a very tight ship. If we spend money, we know exactly why we're spending it, and that we did it prudently. And then, of course, as I mentioned, I'm a big evaluation person. We've got to hit that measurement piece as well. We've got to show people liked it, people learned it, people applied it, it had impact on the business, and we've even taken it to level 5, working in concert with the ROI Institute, really showing monetary impact of our program. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is kind of tiny. I hope you could see it. But there's what I just explained to you. We actually defined, and to me, by the way, the main thing about a strategic plan is that it defines things well and gives people a common language onto which to speak about the strategy. So you see we define relevance, measurement, relationship, and management. There's my run a tight ship that I just said. And then, of course, we had both a vision and a mission. And to me, a vision is aspirational, it's enduring, it really energizes people, whereas the mission is more why we're here and what we do and who we do it for. So, our mission is undeniably to kind of create these learning experiences that pinpoint critical skills at AARP for the entire workforce, right? The vision really is, how do you create energy around this? Ultimately, a good learning and development department doesn't have to beat the bush for participation, right? Good learning and development, the participants themselves and their managers create enough buzz around what's available in the learning so that, you have long lines of people waiting to get into training. And that's something we really do focus on. And I'll explain that in a moment, okay? But, of course, also advances AARP's mission and impact in the future. Next slide. Okay, so again, I can't give you the whole strategic plan. It's 50-some pages, but I took an excerpt from it so you could see how we cascade. We actually paired relevance and measurement, because relevance is kind of the upfront piece of figuring out what's important, and measurement is the back-end piece to figure out, so what's the value and the impact of what you deliver. So you see the strategic direction there, improve relevance and measurement of learning content and programs. Then we have a strategy, which is creating these learning programs that link directly to the business needs. And then, of course, actual goals like having a measurement and evaluation system. We have a proprietary one that we created, launching the leadership development program, and then also a business acumen program. And a lot of these strategies actually focused on getting our house in order and our infrastructure. So like we set up a learning council. So every training requirement now is vetted through a learning council of about 19 people who represent every business unit. And if we can't find broad enterprise application for any idea, let's say it's a team building course, or a critical thinking course, you name it, if we can't figure out how that doesn't help more than just one small business unit, we won't do it. And that's how we really get to that relevance. Next slide, please. Okay, so in addition to building a strategy and working with our stakeholders and building content, we do a lot of our own original research. I won't go too deeply into this. We did 2 studies, one in 2016, which was the learner motivation study. And so we went out, and it was quite complex. It involved interviews, focus groups, and surveys. And basically wanted to learn, okay, we've got these 2,400 employees, right? What do they perceive as, first of all, what are the learning topics they want to learn about, okay? Secondly is, what is the intrinsic motivators that they have to seek out and attend learning? And thirdly, what prevents them from learning? Okay, so imagine a survey that you get that says, here's 40 topics that you could learn about, and you rank them in sets against each other. So we're trying to figure out what are the highest interest for learning topics. And then I think the learning motivation piece was the most interesting is the instrument basically looked like a Myers-Briggs, where it was forced choice. And, if you think about people who attend learning or don't attend learning even, right, there's different things that drive them. There's some folks out there who are the personal enrichment folks, right? They just love to go to learning. It doesn't matter if it's basket weaving. They love learning, okay? Then you have people who are the performance people. They're exactly the opposite. They're like, don't give me any training if it doesn't have to do exactly with the job I'm trying to do today, okay? Then you have the career people, like, I want to learn today for the job that I want in 5 years, right? Then you have the credential people who, if it adds letters after my name and certifications and qualifications, I'm very interested. So the instruments helped us sort out kind of which of these intrinsic drivers drive which populations within AARP, and we use that to kind of build our strategy around the content and how we advertise it, essentially, and promote it. And then corporate executive board came in the next year and did a learning culture study, which looked at how equipped is our population to learn, right? How effective is learning environment? Past experience of learning is a huge predictor of future embracing of learning. So if people have had a lot of positive experience in learning, they're much easier to get them to the table to learn more. If they've had negative experiences, it's much harder, and you have to have specific strategies around that. And then how good are they at learning, period, which is learning capability and ultimately impact. So really, I like this little beaker slide because it kind of shows how we poured the ingredients from the learner motivation study and the learner culture study into our strategies at bottom to come out with the results that we really wanted. Next slide. Okay. So by about mid-2017, now you fast forward about approximately 18 months, all right, you could see across on the left, there's the chart, there's all the different kind of learning we were running, challenging conversations, critical thinking, leading people, situational leadership, project management, and we were doing well. I mean, by all accounts, we were doing well. We had about 2,000 participants. Now remember, that's not 2,000 employees, because one person could take more than one job. Could take more than one class. We've gotten much more sophisticated now. We can actually show unique participants, meaning how many employees. And we delivered 128 workshops. We had about an 80% fill rate. And actually, if you break this down, our more cohort-based program, which we didn't have a lot of, they actually had about a 90% or 95% fill rate. The open workshops, like you see here, were more like 80%. This is where an individual just signs up and takes a one-day class or a two-day class. So we weren't near the goal, which we wanted everything to be over 90%. But our executives were thrilled. They were like, you know what? Before you guys started, we canceled more classes than we held because we couldn't get people to attend. As far as satisfaction, roughly 94% of people who attended our classes indicated that they really liked the class, thought it met the program objectives, they intended to take it back and apply it. And then we did some level 3 studies to show what application rates were as well. Next slide. Okay, so for those of you who are continuous improvement kinds of people, or as I like to refer to myself as neurotic, right? We just weren't happy. Yeah, those results are not bad, but we realized a lot of that was through relying on open workshops. All we had was a few executive development programs, right? And the other thing we realized was, to get that 80% fill rate, we were burning out the team. A lot of the success was because we were beating the bush left and right. We were advertising in our daily newsletter. We were putting it on our intranet. I was personally going around to about a meeting a week, leadership team meetings, and presenting about learning and development. We were calling friends and family to fill classes. And I was like, you know what, we have this incredible workforce within learning and development. And I do believe that. We have an extraordinary team within learning and development, well-educated, very seasoned professionals. However, most of our time is spent on trying to fill seats, right, and design programs rather than let the programs kind of sell themselves. So we were starting to get a little bit burned out. And if you look at that data, we were very lucky to have it because we were the most successful in the largest business units. Like our state offices have almost 700-800 people. They were going to a lot of learning. Other parts of the organization, we had almost no participation, right? So we really wanted to have equal impact. Given our strategy was to have broad appeal across the whole enterprise, we really weren't into every nook and cranny yet. So we had to keep thinking about it. So next slide, please. All right. So then it was a warm July day, and we were sitting in this sparse space in a rented building, and we started really thinking about it. We said, well, hold on a second. We know how well executive education works. People are clamoring to get in, right? And they spend 4, 8, 9 days together. They build projects together. They do experiential learning together. The executives participate. Well, if we could do it for executive education, why couldn't we do it for everybody, right? And what we do know is, no matter how good the content is or the facilitation is, it's about the community. What people love about the executive education program is you come on site, you make friends, those relationships last years and years, right? You see new people's points of view from different parts of the organization. And, if we could replicate that, but not make it executive education, based around the competencies, essentially, this could work really, really well. And by the way, we'd like to get people to use the online learning more, so could we do blended learning? Could we link it to competencies? Could it be competency-based? And how do we get more of this social learning, experiential learning going? So this was really the birth of Connect, which I'll talk about in a moment. Next slide. So what does Connect actually look like? All right. So, and I'm going to show you a curriculum map in just a moment. But we have 38 competencies, and really 22 of them are considered kind of core to all positions, right? So the first one we picked was situational adaptability, which is like how do you read cues in the moment and adapt on the fly? It's very related to decision making, but it's more like decision making under pressure. As the world around you, case in point, COVID-19, and suddenly we're all working from home and can't offer in-person training. How do you really start to become agile and adapt on the fly? And there's a book, there's descriptions of all these in the Korn Ferry competencies. And so we said, why don't we build kind of this 80-hour learning module, right, or learning program? It'll be spread out over 3 modules. So essentially, you come to class for about 2 or 3 days. You go away for a month. While you're gone, you do online learning assignments. You do team assignments together synchronously online. You come back. You do another 3 days. You go do really cool field trips, experiential learning things. You go away for a month. You come back. You do another 3 days. So it's 80 hours, but that includes everything. It's spread out over at least 3 months. Okay? And then we have about 30 people per cohort, and you go through the program with them the whole way, because that's where the bonds and the friendships form. And I always say to my team, if by the end of the second module we don't have people hugging and high-fiving, we haven't done our job. Now, prior to COVID-19, we were very good at hugging and high-fiving. Hopefully that will return someday, right? And then a big goal of this program was, I said, I'm tired of chasing enrollment. I want to have 3 times as many people want to get into the program as we have slots. That is not a bad problem to have. So essentially it's a managed lottery, and 2 months prior to a program launch, we announce it. People fill out a very short form. It's about 2 pages, right? The only requirement to get in is that your manager agrees, and you check a little box that says your manager agrees, and we verify that, right? And that ends up with a participant pool of 80 or 90 people, and then we just use a randomization engine in Excel to pick the people who get in, right? Now we do I say it's a managed lottery because it works out just about perfect. I mean, maybe there's 1 or 2 slots that we have to shift because business unit A only got 2 people in and business unit B got 8 people in, right? So we do a little bit of that, but not much, right? But it's blended in a big way. It's about 8 or 9 days of in-person training. It's got web-based training. It's got really cool social learning experiences. And then the OJT, the on-the-job support, there's all sets of activities for the managers. They actually have their own curriculum that they do, and then for back on the job. So that's kind of how Connect looks. And again, if you have questions about it, I'm going to have you to Q&A shortly, and we can talk some more about it. Next slide. So this is one curricula. It's situational adaptability. As I said, we define what situational adaptability is. It's got definitions. It's got behavioral anchors. It shows what situational adaptability looks like when it's overused, when it's underused. I mean, the materials are quite good that we get on this. Then we do the managed lottery, which I just talked about in yellow. There's a 2-hour orientation, 2 to 3 hours. That's the only part that's all virtual, right? So we don't want people to fly in for a 2-hour session or a 3-hour session. And then you have the workshops. Again, it's usually about 2 to 3 workshops per module, 3 days. Then there's self-directed learning in between modules. There's the really cool community or social learning, and then the OJT. And graduation is quite an affair as well. Usually one of our executives is there. There's a panel discussion and fun stuff to do like that. Next slide. Okay, so I hope you can see this. Again, this is just one curriculum. We have 3 today. We have decision quality. We have situational adaptability, which I just talked about. And our newest one is collaborate, right? But as you can see on the left, there's the orientation. The orientation usually includes some kind of assessment. So like in situational adaptability, they do the emotional intelligence assessment, right? We go over the curriculum. They meet the faculty. We prepare them. And then when they come in the first time for Module 1, Day 1, we have an overview class, which is kind of the essential ingredients for collaboration. And if you see the little icon, but by the way, branding is very important with these programs. So if you see the little hands, heart, and head up in the top right, the hands holding up the heart and the mind, that actually comes from the book that we use for the program, which is called Collaborate Starts With You by Ken Blanchard. And it talks about how collaboration comes from the heart, the head, and the hands. Then we bring in Dr. Rob Cross from Babson College, who talks about his research on organizational networking and how important organizational networking is, and that often we over-communicate with the wrong people, really than understanding the spider web of relationships in an organization that helps us get work done. We bring in Dr. Mike Marquardt, who is the former president of the World Institute for Action Learning. We do action learning sessions, and they go away for about a month, 3 weeks to a month. They come back and do the art of influence. We then do experiential learning exercises. These actually happen at Georgetown University. We have written an incredibly cool game that they use, building an amusement park for the elderly based on the decision-making model. We then teach team dynamics as part of collaboration. And then what's really unique about our program, when we did the needs analysis for this, people at AARP said, well, yeah, the heart, the hands, the mind, I get that, and team dynamics and group dynamics matter. But, there's a structural side to collaboration, too. What kind of technology are we using when we collaborate? How clear are the objectives when we collaborate? How good is the project management? Heck, how well we run meetings even matters. So we have a whole section on the structural side of collaboration, and then we get into a negotiation as well, and how that matters with collaboration. And then we do this incredible game I just mentioned, and more action learning, and then the program reflection. Every single module ends with a reflection, and we actually have curriculum maps where they list out key words, key points, action plans for them to apply these skills to make sure they're really reflecting well on what they've learned. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's kind of my story, our story, up until today. I thought I would just kind of quickly show you the pieces and parts of what, if you work for AARP today, what does that actually look like? So if you go to the next slide. So like everybody, we have a course catalog, right? What's interesting about our course catalog, these are just categories. We have a series of classes around leading and managing, a series around communication, a series around executive education. These same buckets can be used for online learning as well, okay? So I'll just quickly show you, if you see the next slide. Right. So within leading and managing, and again, this is all hypertext, intranet-based catalog. So you can see these are the courses, Situational Leadership by Ken Blanchard, Team Leadership, Self-Leadership, Coaching, Management Essentials, Building Trust, Leading People Through Change. And we have some that don't appear here that you can get them if you have a big enough cohort of your own. So let's say you're the head of finance and you have 25 people and you say, I really like leading people through change. That's actually not available as an open enrollment, but if you bring together enough people, we'll run it for you. And most of our managers have departments big enough that they could just order it, right? Now, we still go in and do a needs assessment and look at the performance issues they're trying to address, and we'll often say, or even won't run training if we think, A, it could do harm, or B, they're just trying to throw training at a problem without really understanding the problem. So we're pretty selective in when we say yes to make sure we don't become order takers. Next slide. Okay, under communication, we have effective business writing, giving feedback, leading virtual, and we're trying something new this year, which I like to refer to as wine pairing, right? So just like with Amazon, if you read a good book on, the Civil War or leadership, it'll say, hey, here's some other really good books that you should try. So now to support people creating their individual development plans, we actually help them understand all the courses underneath these that really go very, very well together. But it's totally up to them. They can mix and match any way that they want to. Okay, next slide. And then, of course, I mentioned executive education. We run this through our partnership with Georgetown University. It's extremely popular. One thing to explain is our goal is to put everybody through this program. So we have 350 directors at AARP who are people managers. Eventually, they'll all get it, okay? We run 2 cohorts a year, about 35 people per cohort. So you can do the math. It takes us about 5 years to get everybody through it. But again, the friendships, the relationships that form are way, way worth the investment, right? And of course, you always have people getting promoted or new to the organization who will need it. So for Agile, which is VP and above, we've actually cleared out the pipe. There are no, well, there are very few, 1 and 2, who still need it, okay? And I apologize. There's a typo on my slide I just noticed. Agile on the right is for VPs and above. ADEPT on the left is for directors. In fact, ADEPT stands for AARP Directors Executive Program. So anyway, my bad. But everything else is correct. So anyway, everybody gets this. So really, we just use randomization. We take that list of 350 people. We exclude anybody who's already been through the program. We shake the hat. We pull out our 35 names, and off they go. And of course, people are clamoring to get in. So, our bigger problem is people who haven't made it through yet are saying, when's my chance? When's my chance? So it really works out quite well. So, next slide. All right, so I made it to the end. I did it in exactly 44 minutes. We're planning on 45. So that gives us 15 minutes about to have Q&A. So I'll turn it back over to you and answer any questions.
Thank you, Ethan. We really enjoyed your presentation. Before I go out and present the questions that were submitted during it, do we have any live questions? Again, it's *6 to unmute your line and go ahead with your questions, or you can click anywhere on this last slide and post your question as a comment. So again, any live questions? Okay, Ethan, we received several questions throughout your presentation. Keep in mind you may have touched on these topics, but I'm going to ask all the questions anyway in case there's something you'd like to add to or elaborate on.
Sure.
Okay, the first question that came in was who was involved in developing the strategy that came out of your planning process?
Okay, so it was an iterative approach. I mean, I would absolutely say myself and my team led this process. So there were no workshops where we weren't not only present, I mean, I was pretty much facilitating it. I tried to keep my opinions out, but my team was there. Of course, these were all seasoned professionals, and that's why we hired them, right? A lot of our folks from our HR consulting group were there, okay? And many of the VPs from the different, talent acquisition, HR consulting were there. And then kind of key stakeholders from different parts of the business. Now, I do believe, people hire you to steer the ship, right? So we weren't necessarily asking them, what do you think talent development should look like, right? We were asking them things like, what are your greatest learning needs, right? And what does it take for you to have confidence and measure impact in learning, right? So at different parts, the strategic planning process went on from October really, through about May, okay? So it was an iterative process. So depending on where we were in the strategic planning process, we were involving other people, but I would definitely say organization development folks, talent management folks, HR consulting and talent acquisition were in there for the majority of the development. And of course our CHRO at the time was involved as well.
Okay, thank you for that. The second question that came in is, at what point did you hire the L&D people you were going to need to accomplish this?
That was actually the very first thing I did, right? So quite honestly, when I got there and there was nobody there, I used a lot of first I teach graduate school, so I have access to grad students. That's an unfair advantage, I know. And I had former colleagues of mine that did a lot of the upfront research on best practices in learning and development. So that was all going on. Now we're talking October, November, into December, and at the same time I was sourcing applicants and looking through resumes of people to hire. I had the entire team on board by January 1st, 2016. And again, most of the workshops actually for the strategy started in mid-January. So it was baptism by fire for a lot of my teammates when they first came in because, we already had workshops scheduled for doing strategy development. And they just jumped right in,
Yeah. Okay, great. The third question that came in was, if a business unit wants training that does not apply outside that business unit, does learning and development try to find outside training they could use?
That is a very good question. I would say we tap dance. Let me put it that way, okay? So it depends on how far outside. Well, let me back up. We want to excite people about development regardless, okay? We get some pure requests. Remember, they have their own budgets, right? So we get some pure requests that are really technical kinds of training. If IT came to us and said they wanted C++ programming, which I know doesn't exist anymore, we wouldn't have anything to do with that, right? Now, what has happened, actually, we did a strategy for IT, and they said, we're looking at multiple venues for getting certification and qualifications for our IT staff, and we'll go in and review different vendors' curriculum from an instructional standpoint. Obviously, we're not technologists, so we can't speak for the technology, but we can certainly say, hey, these programs have clear descriptions, clear goals, they're interactive, they have assessments built in. We will provide that level of advice, but they'll basically go out and do their own shopping ultimately and buy it, okay? What I would say is we're pretty good at putting together 2 or 3 different business units who have similar requests and saying, together you could form a cohort and make this happen. right? And I'd say in some limited cases, we have business units come to us. Let me give you an example. You know, we have an amazing research function at AARP. It's incredible, right? Obviously, they're looking at millions of Americans and trying to source trends or spot trends. So they came to us last year, really wanted a class on telling story with data, because they're excellent at research, right? But they're not as good at how do you tell the story behind the research. You know, so in that case, it was such a compelling business need because our research ultimately leads to our policies, and our policies ultimately lead to our advocacy and ultimately to legislation that benefits 50 plus, right? So in that case, we did work in partnership with them to identify a vendor who did it really, really well. And actually, we had our favor, they kind of had their favor, and we helped kind of facilitate a competition to figure out who would fit the need better. You know, so, and at the same time, we have people come to us all the time and ask us for stuff. We're like, yeah, we just don't. You know, you don't want to become order takers, but you also don't want to be perceived as obstinate. So that's why I started with tap dance, because I wish I knew a perfect formula for sustaining relationships and making sure all training has value, you know, and that we don't do something dumb, you know. So it's a balancing act, for sure.
Okay, good. And the last question that came in is, would you talk a little bit about the connect element that you provide to managers?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So let me first say, you know, I don't work on commission for any vendor, right? We are corporate executive board members, right? Really like their research and their tools, and we know, I mean, there's plenty of research to show, if you don't get the managers actively involved, learning is never going to stick. You know, it's far more important. And we do learning transfer studies within AARP, which show this over and over again. The manager has to be involved. So looking at different ways that we can involve the managers, you know, we said it's less about, I mean, they have to be familiar with what's taught in the program. It's more about helping them understand what a good developer as a manager looks like. We became focused on that very, very quickly, right? I think you have a lot of well-intentioned managers out there who are very good at managing cost, schedule, and performance, right? But they're just not very self-assured in terms of how do I develop my staff, you know, and it runs the gamut. Some managers are like, well, the employee figures out what they want, they tell me, and I authorize it. To others that don't. So anyway, the CED has a study called the Connector Manager. And they went out and really looked at what are the different ways that a manager can act as a developer, right? They have these 4 different ways, and they have great labels. Like one's the cheerleader, you know, rah, go get training. The other is the teacher, right, which is I'm going to put you under my wing, almost like an apprenticeship model, and I'm going to teach you what I know so that someday you could be as smart as I am, right? I forget the 4th one, but the 3rd one was the Connector Manager. And their research shows performance actually goes up by 12%. It actually goes down with the teacher, and it goes down with the cheerleader, and it goes up with the connector manager. And the idea is, don't spend all your time trying to teach everybody how to do their job. Connect them with the right people, the right resources, the right knowledge. You know, so you're better off saying, you know, you want to learn about how to tell stories with data. I know this person who, the best I've ever seen. You should go have lunch with them, you know, or read this book, or maybe the stretch assignment really gets you to where you want to go, right? So they have an online curriculum. It's about 2 hours long, and essentially we have the managers take that course online, and we can track it, whether they've taken it, and then we have calls about mid-course and towards the end of the course, where they not only talk about what do their employees learn, but what did they learn and how has that helped them become better developers and managers. So it's really quite good. I'll also share the funniest part of that study. You really should read it if you're ED members. They went around to learning and development people like me who run learning and development shops, and said, you know, when you think about managers and all their time, how much of their time should they spend developing their staff? And most L&D professionals said, you know, about half your time as a manager should be spent managing your staff. And then they went around and asked a whole bunch of line managers, well, how much time do you think you could afford to manage your staff? And they said about 8% of my time. You know, and they gave really good reasons. They said, you know, the average manager in the U.S. Reads and responds to 122 emails a day. They attend 5.5 hours of meetings a day, right? And the list just goes on. And basically what you see is the average manager has 8 hours of work before they even start to do anything else. So how could 50% of their time be development? You've got to make it more streamlined for managers to help their employees develop, which is why the connector manager works better. It takes me a lot longer to teach you how to do data analytics than it does for me to have you meet with a data analytics expert and learn from them, or read a great book on data analytics. So it was really an eye-opening part of the development of this program, in my view.
Okay, good. We've covered everybody's questions. Do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom you'd like to share before we end the summit today?
Well, obviously we're living in an unprecedented time with everything going on with pandemic and everything else, And I've stayed in this profession for 30 years because I really believe it's one of the most noble professions there is. And the reason is, as adults, we spend the majority of our waking hours at work, right? And work can be a very fulfilling place. It can derive a lot of meaning in our lives, and it can also be incredibly depressing if we don't have the right people and the right skills for the right jobs and the right leaders, right? So despite what everybody I'm sure is going through, I just encourage everybody to be innovative, be flexible, keep trying. I am absolutely in learning mode every day. I have no idea. I started 2020 knowing exactly what our offerings were going to look like, and now every day we're making up something new to make sure, because our job is to help people, and we have a lot of employees out there who are struggling with the same uncertainties that we are. I feel incredibly fortunate to be in a business where I can make some small dent in that for people. So I encourage each of you to, and I applaud your efforts to support the workforce as we go through a crazy time. And thank you.
Wonderful thoughts, Ethan. And on behalf of all the executives on the line, I'd like to thank you for sharing such powerful ideas and key thoughts with us today. Your involvement and dedication to our profession sets a high benchmark for others to follow. For all of the participants on today's call, thank you for your continued membership and insightful questions for today's speaker. The meeting is now officially concluded. Ethan, thanks again, and everybody have a great day.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, Ethan.
Bye.
Thanks.